Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. I'm your host, Randy Atkins, and I have a special guest today. At the core of his being, Chris Cochran embraces the role of a father, husband, and friend professionally. His journey spans over 3 decades, during which he has held pivotal roles in sales, marketing, operations, and P&L management within large public companies. Chris has a dedication of spreading kindness and generosity, which is embodied in his involvement with the Christian Cochran Legacy Foundation through the Pittsburgh Foundation, a fund through the Pittsburgh Foundation, a nonprofit organization inspired by his son Christian's enduring spirit. This commitment to making a positive impact is further reflected in his book, That What's Good About Today, A Purpose-Driven Life. It was released back in August. Chris, welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Randy. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Love your show, and I'm honored to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And as I always love to start off is, for the audience's sake, if you could provide the audience with an idea of your particular journey and how you ended up here and what your message is really focused on.
Yeah, thanks. Well, to be completely candid with you, I wish I didn't have to be here to do these things sometimes. I wish my life had turned out a little different. But, like any average family, I, sort of two sides, right? Professionally and the personal side. Married my high school sweetheart. We had a beautiful wedding and honeymoon, and the most important thing is that we want to have children. Our firstborn was Christian, and everything was like anything. We were raising children and going through that process. In August 26 of 2000, my son was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was diagnosed with something called cholangiocarcinoma. It's bile duct cancer. It's a very rare cancer. It really affects individuals who are in Southeast Asia, older people. It was not something you would see in someone who's young like Christian. Christian had just graduated college. He was an honors kid. He come home. He only went to school about an hour and 15 minutes away from us, so we were always close and we saw him all the time. He experienced some pain in his back, and then closer towards that August term point, he started having immense pain, and we went and we had blood tests, and those blood tests, long short, had a CT scan. CT scan showed something, went to Hillman Cancer Institute, and that's where they diagnosed Christian, told him he had terminal cancer. And that's that moment, of course, where I buckled to my knees practically, but I do remember my son putting his hand on my shoulder and telling me everything was going to be okay, and he was perfectly fine, told me I was going to be fine, and everything would be fine. But that took a shift, of course, on the family, an otherwise perfect life, right? Good working. I had a great job. I'm doing great. I'm an entrepreneur, run an IT company, still do, sit on the board for a couple companies, and things going perfectly swimmingly. But we were hit with the worst news possible, that our firstborn son was hit with a terminal illness. But it's really how he handled things that shapes really the journey in which I'm on right now. And that's why I wrote the book, because when Christian came home that day and his mother and I sat down and said how sorry we were, the first thing he said was, "It's okay. I'd rather it be me than anyone else." And he never complained one time through his entire illness. As a matter of fact, he never said, "Why me?" He said, "What's good about today?" And he would tell us that and remind us, because you can find beauty, you can find absolute wonder in this world every single day. You just have to find it. And he always found that. And so I've tried to capture that when I go out and I speak to individuals and I talk to groups, to share with them the experience that we went through as a family, certainly the grieving element, but really how we kind of transformed ourselves, because statistically, families do fall apart when things like this happen, because grieving is different for everyone. But we focus on the good, the things that we can do good in the world on a daily basis.
Wow, Christopher, thank you for sharing that as a basis. And Really, I can imagine that your son was a trooper, definitely being able to provide in that kind of environment when we're looking at, pretty much our life in to say, me, I want it to be, it's okay if it's me, but now I want to share what is it that's good about today. And I definitely want to dive deeper into that because many of us end up in places like that. We end up in a space where maybe we are grieving a loss of a loved one. We are in a space where maybe life is not going quite the way we want it to go. How do we get to a space where we can kind of see that outlook on life that's there? So as we're talking, we introduced the book that you have written, and I think it's very important to begin to share. It has a lot of definitely parallels with the message that we share here on the Produce on Purpose podcast. Is you wrote the book primarily after this incident. When it comes to writing this particular book, what would be the thing that you would want anyone to be able to get out of the theme of this particular book that you've written as they move forward?
Well, in the end, what I describe it as is a love story, right? It's a love story of a family that went through something traumatic. Families across this country, across this world, deal with traumatic events. There's nothing worse than losing your child. And I always say it's like sticky glue. It never rubs off of you, right? I've lost my parents. We've all lost people. It's a universal thing that we all have. But I think the basis of the book is really to tell a love story between ourselves and how we navigated the grief, of course, and how we came out on the other side, sticking together, loving one another, and really following in the footsteps of what Christian wanted. I always say, when you look at families, the father and the mother are the center of that family unit. The truth is, a Christian was the center of our unit, and we would look to Christian for lots of things. He was a rare individual. He looked at the world very differently than everyone else, and he could really, it's like he could see into the future, and it was very philosophical about things, and he understood things. But really, when you look at the book, I try to give, there's a lot in the book, but truly I like to talk about the power of your perspective, and that's important. I also think talking about resiliency in all your daily choices is another thing that's important that I talk about, and ultimately trying to build upon that and build a legacy that's really built on small moments, and that's important because legacy is not measured by years. It's measured by the moments. And, I think it depends on what are we building a legacy? We're building it on what we do today. And so the book is really geared around those topics. And I take it, again, it's a story from the beginning. When I met my wife, we're high school sweethearts. And so it takes you through that journey. Really up to the end. And then, of course, the legacy and what we're trying to do to make an impact in this world, our community, and hopefully farther outside of just our community.
Yeah, I believe that one of the key elements that I think maybe at some point in time in life we all have a question about is why are we here? What's our particular reason? And when it comes down to it, you talk about those moments, you talk about the impact that we may have. And so it's not the time that we are here or the length, but it's the impact, it's those moments and understanding what those moments kind of provide. And so, is there a particular tip? And I know you talked about this love story and about what your son was able to provide. You talked about small steps. How does that fit into our daily lives that may be able to be helpful in giving us that new perspective that you talked about?
I talk a lot of, well, when I talk, I'm using really Christian's principles, and that's why the book it's a purpose-driven life, because I think the book provides tidbits of how you can lead that purposely driven life. I'm always striving to lead that purposely driven life. But I think when you look at the world is really governed by this, and you mentioned the clock, right? We're governed by this relentless ticking clock. I believe the essentially measuring our lives not just by days or by years, but by the moments that are filled with, but more filled with joy and acts of kindness and the pursuit of that meaning. And I think, the question of why, that hits you obviously when this happens to you or happens to anybody. Why me? Why did it happen to him? Christian's such a good person. We're a good family. We go to church we're doing all the right things that we're supposed to do. But once you get past the whys, you realize two things for me, and I think it's helpful. One is to be humbled before God. You can tell even by Christian's name, we're Christians, but I'm very humbled before God. But two, that helps you get past the why is to realize you're not in control, right? Much
Hmm.
of our lives, we think we're in control. Now, if you talk to Chris Cochran 4 years ago, pre-cancer, I thought I could control everything. I thought,
Right.
it was, I want the bigger car, the house, you're keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. I want to put my kid in the best school. All these things that to me today are so mundane. They mean really nothing to me. But I think, the question is really once you get past that, it's really the love that you're sharing, the impact you're in connecting with other people. And I am fundamentally convinced that when people focus on the day, they focus on the simplicity of things and not try to act like they can control everything, that life starts to have a little bit more purpose, right? Because you
Yeah.
realize there's a higher power that's guiding us. And I talk about that in the book. There's a book called Christian's Tao, and Christian was obviously he accepted all religions because a lot of the religions are tied into to each other in many ways. But Taoism talks about flowing with the river and not against the river, right? And so when we learn to flow and we learn that it's not in our control, we do the best that we can, we do right, we do good. And I narrow it down, of course, to what's good about today because that's how I manage my life because of what Christian taught me and what he told us to do. And that's just waking up, what's good about today. And Christian had this great thing. Instead of to-do list, which everybody has to-do list,
Hmm.
Christian had to love list. And so I follow that practice too. It's who can I love today? Who can I spread my love to today? Who can I impact today with love? And I think when you break away from those to-do list, I think it really enhances your life because you're helping others. And in a way, it's really just helping me because when I help others, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. So that's what Christian did. I'm just following his way.
It's interesting that you talk about the what are you sharing about relationships. So instead of the to-do list, the idea that finding out, what is my list of love today. I
Right.
think about some of the main areas of our lives. We always talk about our health, our wealth, and our relationships, and real paramount of what's going to be the important part of who we are and what we do on a daily basis is really our relationships, because in the end, what do we have? All of this other stuff, we're promised that we will leave here no matter what it is, that all of that stuff will be left, but the relationships are the way that we impact this world. So I think there was some wisdom there of saying, who can I love today? What can
Mhm.
I do to love in a greater way? That is very interesting. You also talked about the Tao and how the Tao kind of provides you the flowing with the world versus, always kind of up against trying to figure out what's going on, and that there are a lot of things that are completely out of our control. I've always been told that we have the ability to choose our reactions
Mm-hmm.
and choose how we go about the day with intention. I believe that really when we understand that we can be intentional about our days, I think it actually makes it a lot more tenable and easier to kind of walk through. As
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking about that, In a particular day, so now the what's good about today, is this something that we should ask in the morning? How should we include this in our lives?
Yeah, every day, every single day. I preach it because it's a mind shift, right? I think we're all on this fast track and life moves very fast. But for me, it's a daily routine.
Hmm.
I do it when I wake up in the morning. You go like, well, how can you say what's good about today? It's first thing in the morning, right? But there's always something good about when you first wake up in the morning. The sun is shining. I got a cup of coffee. My eyes are wide open. I'm able to walk. I'm able to talk. I'm able to talk to my wife. I'm able to call my son real quick. Or it could be a host of things that happen all the time in the morning that you can still say what's good about today. And at the end of the day, I always reflect back on my day. And I like to say, what have I, and this is something I'm not making something up that someone hasn't already done. I meet a lot of people in my day. I spoke to a conference yesterday. I met every individual within that presentation, and I got to learn their stories. But at the end of my presentation, I have everyone sign their name, not their last name, just their first name, because I take that list and I go home at the end of the night and I pray for each one of those individuals. I think it's important for me, at least that's part of what's good about today. It allows me an opportunity to pray for those other people that I've met and hope for goodness in their life, hope that they're protected through their day. And so it's definitely something that I use every day, and I hope others do too. That's the whole mission here is really to get this, and of course the book out. It's kind of you're always trying to push the book, but it's a tough thing. I'm talking about something that's very sensitive and very deep and heartfelt, and it's very cumbersome on my heart. But I also know that what brings me joy is to be able to spread Christian's message because I know that's what he would want me to do. And so every day you can say what's good about today. And the nice thing is it's not complicated. We're not talking about something that's complex here. It's just a question. And if you can question yourself what you've done today and look at the goodness, and so many people have bad days. But I think if you reflect back on that day, you can find goodness in that day.
I agree. One of the things I love to do when I wake up in the morning is to understand that today is a gift. It just is where I can have opportunity. I have multiple possibilities for this particular day, and having that level of gratitude at the earliest in the morning, I think, is starting to ask that same question: what's good about today? And I believe this is something we can it help us to become more aware of ourselves, more aware of how we are speaking and how we're kind of going about the day, how we're interacting with others. And I believe it also helps to make you aware. At one point, I remember there's this great little tool that you can kind of work on. I just thought about this as we had some black beans and some white beans,
Mhm.
and we'd have a jar that we could utilize. And every time I would say something that's negative, I put a black bean in the jar. And every time I say something positive, I put a white bean in the jar. So at first, it's a lot of black beans, but what it causes, if you do it on a daily basis, is that you will find that over time you will notice that I'm probably not saying as many negative things as I had been doing before.
Hmm.
And so as we're talking about this, I thought about that. We did that a few years ago with some married couples and said, hey, take a look at let's do this exercise for a week and start to do that. And we did it for over a week. And after a while, you notice that what you talk about, how you express things become more positive.
Mhm.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking that you must be describing something like that in your book of how do we remain more positive in our day? I know we can ask the question, what are some other things we can do based on your experience? Because, when you're going through that kind of deep grief of being more positive on a daily basis.
I talk a lot about the power of the pause. And the power of the pause, it's I've come to understand the profound impact of taking moments of pause and reflect. And what pausing does, it allows me, and I think it can allow others, to meet life with grace, to see beyond pain. You can find gratitude, as you talked about, in the present.
Right.
Because the true act of pausing it's a valuable gift, really, and it offers us all space to breathe,
Hmm.
feel deeply, and connect the essence of our being, right? So I think there's much to be said when you pause. And I'm sure even in relationships and how you are with your spouse or girlfriend or partner, you must pausing is a good technique because it just gives you time to reflect on everything a lot easier. I pause quite often, especially when I'm meeting people, and I take a lot of information in. And you can imagine, when I do presentations and I meet and I do speaking engagements, some of the things that the people that come to mind come with heavy burdens, tremendous heavy burdens. And and it's not a comparison thing, but when I listen to their burdens, my burden is nothing. I feel very blessed. I got to spend time with my son. I got to be with my son. I got to be with him the whole time during this process, all painful as it was and things that we went through. But we got to talk. We got to say goodbye. We got to do all these things. A lot of people don't get that. And so I think, I try to, you know, tell people that when you pause, it's really in the pauses that we discover our resilience, we discover our strength, and we can rekindle joy in life, even in adversity. There's beauty to be found there and lessons to be learned. And I think those are important areas of the book as well.
Yeah, taking on a pause. Wow, I think that's a really good way of being able to approach a situation because sometimes we can become overwhelmed. We can feel anxiety in particular situations, and just taking a pause can give us enough of what we need to either take that next step or have that next conversation or whatever we need to do in those moments and trying to clear up whatever else that may be not fully talked about or walked through. We're able to do that as well. So along with that gratitude, along with what you shared about the pausing, I think it's interesting that you're able to kind of still move forward even in those difficult times and through sounds like through purpose. And so you talk about the purpose driven life and you talked about a little bit of that portion of that. How does that play a role in making sure that we are finding out what's good about today?
Well, I think when you look at the purpose of life, right? That's what we're all seeking, right? We're all trying to figure out why a lot of things. Why are we here? What's my purpose as an individual? We all have a purpose. We all have a destiny. Some can be tragic, some are joyful. Um, but in the end, we all universally experience hardships, and it hands us challenges. Certain things can bring us down to our knees like it has to me. And sometimes you don't know how to move forward. But there is one thing that Christian taught me is there's always something good. And it might be small, it might be hidden, but it's there. And when you choose to focus on that, when you embrace resilience, and when you commit to creating a legacy that's built on love, kindness, and courage, we don't just survive, we thrive. And I think that's important, even when you go through difficult times, which, I'm not going to lie to you. To be authentic, the first year and a half, I was a complete mess.
Hmm.
I was not good. I think the first Christmas that we had, I think I'm not a drinker, by the way, but I started drinking. And I'd started drinking, I think I started drinking by 2 o'clock. I was probably passed out by 5 o'clock. And in my family, that you just don't do that because those are moments that my other kids were wanting me to read to them that night and, keep traditions up. And those were failings on my side. But I think, I've learned, I've been in the darkest of moments. I've stayed in bed all day, not knowing what I was going to do next, not knowing what my purpose was.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you really just got to kick yourself in the butt, I guess, and go, look, there is purpose to this. There has to be. That's what I kept telling myself. There has to be purpose in this. There's no way this kind of thing could happen unless there's purpose. And so I always went to a quote. Bruce Lee used to say this quote, and I remind myself of it all the time, still do. Don't pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. And it's true, because life is difficult for everyone. It's difficult I'm sure it's difficult for you. It's difficult for everyone. But you have, you find the strength to endure the difficult ones. And so I remind myself of that. And it's a good quote because it just reminds me it's never going to be easy. It's going to have difficult moments, but it's how you react to them, how you come out on top of them, and how you help others, most importantly.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm reminded, and I write about this in my book as well. My brother, he was in a tragic car accident at the age of 19.
Okay.
What occurred during that time is very similar to what you're talking about. You're looking, when is this person going to be able to come through the door, other items, but what is it that, and in those moments, that what I found was that there has to be some support somewhere around, whether it's family, therapist, pastor, that can, at least as you're processing, that you are kind of getting to a place. And in my story, the purpose ended up being that 6 months later, my mom came to a Christmas gathering with a letter that she found on a computer upstairs, and she brought the letter, and the letter was about me from my brother.
Oh, wow.
And we had never seen it, never heard it, and he wrote the letter, and in the letter he talked about how proud he was of me. I had had many conversations with him as he had been around, and I never thought I got through to him. But during that time and during that day, I knew what I needed to do was continue to share a message, and share that message, because I never know who I'm affecting or who I'm actually touching when I share that message. And so part of my purpose from that day on, and it's almost been now almost 20 years as of next year, that I'm going to continue to share a message out of that. The question I have for you is, now with that, and I know you've written a book, how much did support systems, because I ended up having family and faith and other areas that I think combined over time help, and everyone goes through this process in their own way. How did support kind of help with you? What kind of support did you see with your family and what you guys did?
Well, I think everything you just mentioned, I've done. Right.
Yeah.
I have gone to see therapists, I think early on. Many, many months afterwards. I think I didn't want to talk to anybody afterwards, and that's probably normal. As I say, grief is different for every person, right? Everybody goes through a different process in this. Look, we're a tight-knit family. Statistically, families fall apart after things like this. So, what was really important for me was to keep the family together. We were always close, but, my wife is grieving. It's her firstborn. She's going through it's traumatic, obviously. I'm going through a difficult time losing my son, knowing what I'm going to not get for the future, right? Same with her. She, and he is, Christian had 2 siblings. He had a younger sister who's 15 months younger, and a younger brother who's 4 years younger there. So every one of us was dealing with it, but we kept here's what we did. My family, especially my daughter, keeping traditions is really important to her. And when I say traditions, it's the same thing, whether it was Christmas or it's Halloween or it's Easter, we had traditions like all families. We do, whether it's a meeting together to eat or be together. If it's sitting around the Christmas tree and reading the night before Christmas, those were traditions. And I now, of course, keep those traditions because they're important to my family. And I know that's important. And it keeps us kind of moving. Support wise, friends, family, neighborhoods, it never stops, to be honest. It's been 3 years. Now, today marks the anniversary of 3 years ago. That was my son's memorial, where he had almost 1,000 people show up at the church, which is extraordinary. It was a tremendous, huge crowd of people from all walks of life, every cultural diversity background you could possibly imagine, religiously, ethnically, that Christian touched. And so that support, learning the stories, how he affected each individual has been important as part of that support. Certainly friends, but I think anybody who goes through losing a child will tell you probably the same thing. It's really tough to reconnect with your friends that you've had, because got to remember, all these families we've known, their kids were the same age as Christian. Right. And so they're all, I'm watching them grow and prosper. My son's dead. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I don't get to see that. So it's really tough to witness that, because that's what my son should be doing. He should be flourishing. He should be doing all these things. So I think it can be really, I hear that consistently, that's why families who lose a child sort of back off of friends and back away. But I know that support mechanism is there, and it doesn't take a lot. The truth is all you have to do is say I love you. It could be sometimes just a call, say I'm thinking about you, I care about you. It's okay to talk about Christian. I love talking about Christian. So I think, support's a critical element. I think as you get into this deeper, because for me, the first year I was numb. The second year, it was actually worse, right? Because you're like, should this get better, right? But the truth is, it does it gets worse, I guess, before it gets better. It better's not the right word, but maybe the knife is not as sharp. It becomes a little bit, duller. But I think, having that mechanism, I think also my therapy is just talking, having connections with others, and trying to help. So it is important. I agree with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I do believe that support can look in many different forms, and it doesn't have to be a particular way, but I do believe that is what helps, and that as time goes on, it's processing, figuring out, and getting to a level of acceptance to whatever it is that you are dealing with or having to go through. So as we are coming, it's like always comes so fast.
I know. I'm looking at it,
I'm
it's like 33 minutes. I'm like, what? We just got on here.
Exactly.
I get it. It's crazy.
So I'm going to ask this question. I love asking this question because it kind of helps us to focus and to kind of summarize. If you had to leave the audience with 2 or 3 areas for them that are important for them to really grasp a hold of in this lifetime, based on your journey, it doesn't have to be based on just the book, but your journey from business to family life and everything that you're doing, what would those 2 to 3 things be, and that you would want them to make sure that they take on and start to apply to their lives?
Sure. Well, first for me is be present. Now, I know we throw that word around, be present, be present. What does that mean? That really means that you engage with other individuals. When you're with them, you stay with them. It's one of the things I always admired about Christian too, is the ability to stay within the moment. So when you're speaking to someone, you're with that person. I don't know how many of you out there, and I'm sure, Randy, you've dealt with this, where you meet someone, they're talking to you, but it's like their mind went somewhere else. They're not really with you. And I've learned that it's very important to stay present with anybody who's that you're talking with, for whatever reason, especially if it's a grief situation, to be there with them. I also think that having the resiliency of making good daily choices, right? I think when the choices are made to thrive off of love and to, make sure that you're engaging other individuals, connecting. I say connecting the dots because I've done, I've spoken at places and I've had people call me up and they go, Chris, we've only got 10 people showing up for this to do this. Have you when you're speaking? And I said, oh, that's fine with me. It could be one person. Doesn't matter to me because it's always the ripple effect that one person can have on the rest of the world. And so remember that it doesn't always mean that it's in the numbers that are out there than people that you talk to or you're telling your story, whatever your story is, that one person can tell another person. And knowing your story, Randy, right? You told me your story. I'm going to tell other people that story.
Yeah.
And it has that effect. I also think, it's important for all of us. My last point is legacy. And what legacy do you want to leave on this earth? What is it that you want to do? And when I say legacy, it's not legacy. A lot of people, if you haven't had traumatic events, it's not legacy by accomplishments, right? Because you can't, like you said earlier, you can't take those with you, right? And so I think building upon a legacy of love and kindness, connectivity, caring, taking on the suffering of others. Now, so many people run away from suffering. They want to avoid suffering. But what I try to tell people is no, see, suffering is a part of the human experience. Yes, you'll have your own suffering, but people who are suffering, it's okay to go to them and endure some of their suffering. Because I do believe the higher amount of suffering, the closer you are to God. So I think that that's important. That and suffering is not necessarily in death. It could be suffering that someone's homeless. It could be they have there's so many kids that we interact with through the foundation that have broken homes and have nothing, and so that's a lot of suffering, and you want to tie yourself into that and find ways to do that and build a legacy upon doing good things. So those are my three things I would leave you with.
Presence, make sure we're present in the moment to make sure we have that resiliency, and also making sure that in the end we're making those right connections in the end that we need to. Um, Christopher, thank you for coming on, sharing this great story, being able to pass this along, and telling us what's good about today, because I'm going to take that, and hopefully everyone in the audience will listen
Steal
and
it.
use it every
Yes,
day. Just
I hope
just
so.
say it. What's good
Yeah.
about today? And even in those moments, what's good about today? And
Right.
Christian will continue to live on through what you are doing and sharing. And thank you for continuing to share this message, and also passing along the loving heart that he had and provided to the world. So we appreciate that, and that you continue to do that. How can my audience get in contact with you, and where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can do a couple things. You can certainly Google Christian Cochran. They'll probably pull up a lot of information. It'll probably take you to the foundation. We have a christiancochran.org. It's a website for all about Christian and his life and the impact that he made on the world. Also, events that we hold talks about our foundation and what we're doing and giving back. We show that. We show what we're doing with communities at large. If you want to get in contact with me, it's chriscochranspeaks.com, where I do speaking engagements. I provide advice, and people can reach out to me directly. And the book is available globally at this point. It's global distribution. It's on Amazon. It's in Barnes & Noble. It's probably on many other major outlets across the globe. And so I hope people make a decision to pick it up. And if you do, feel free to write a review or even write me anything. As long as it's a good review. I don't want a bad review. So if you can, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. If you're going through something, feel free to reach out to me. I have a good ear, and I like to listen to people and take that on.
Well, Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the Produce on Purpose podcast and sharing such great pieces of your journey. And as we are all listening and gathering what you have provided, I'm going to continue to ask what's good about today. I'm going to
Awesome.
think about what really legacy really means, how it means to be resilient on a day-to-day basis. What should I be doing and thinking about? And really keying in on the relationships, being present, being in the moment, knowing that I should be in the moment with everyone that I meet and that those relationships are very important. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to continue to produce on purpose.